It's great to be here, Sana. And for all our listeners, we know your time is valuable. So our mission with this deep dive is, well, to cut right through the noise in the Seoul Economic Daily's finance section.
Exactly. We give you a clear shortcut so you can really get a handle on the critical financial currents shaping today's world.
And today we're looking at this real snapshot of the intense pressure facing the Korean financial system.
We really are. We're going to dive into the huge fiscal burdens that banks are carrying because of something called win-win finance. Then we'll contrast that with some amazing success stories on the ground.
And finally, we'll look at how these evolving international capital rules are, really tightening the screws. It's a mix of social demands and global regulation.
It's a real tension. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, you said it. On one hand, there's this expectation for banks to play a huge social role, with contributions and lending support.
And on the other?
On the other, they're tied to these international standards that demand much tighter risk management. We'll look at both and, like you said, compare them to a truly successful localized finance model that's out there.
Let's start with that social pressure then. Specifically this idea of win-win finance, or janemu.
Yeah.
The numbers here are frankly kind of striking.
They are.
These special or voluntary contributions, the silo communia, that banks give to policy guarantee institutions like Shinbo and Kibo, they've nearly doubled.
Doubled compared to pre-pandemic levels, yeah. According to the data, the total for these special contributions in just the first 9 months of this year hit 693.9 billion KRW.
And that's almost all of last year's total already.
Exactly. It's knocking on the door of the 709.9 billion KRW from all of last year. And if you go back to 2019, it was 360.3 billion. So that's a 1.9-fold increase. I mean, the pace is just... it's alarming.
So that raises the big question. Why? Why is this spiking so fast? I get the mandatory contributions, but these are supposed to be voluntary. What's making the banks so eager?
Well, eager might be a strong word. The main driver is the government's big push for win-win finance.
Okay.
Which basically means banks are being told to offer way more support for SMEs and small business owners. And here's how it works.
Right.
Small business loans are risky, right? So by making these special contributions, banks get access to policy guarantee products that can cover, say, 85% or even 100% of the loan. The contributions are sort of like a premium to de-risk these loans.
So it seems like most of this quote-unquote voluntary pressure is really aimed at helping the smallest businesses, especially through the regional credit guarantee foundations, the regional Shinbo.
That is exactly where the growth is concentrated. The voluntary contributions just to the regional Shinbo hit 472 billion KRW in 9 months. That's already 5.4% more than all of last year.
Wow.
So when you add it all up, the mandatory and the special amounts, total bank contributions are almost certain to go over 3 trillion KRW for the second year in a row.
That's a huge figure. And like supporting small businesses is a great goal, but that kind of financial engineering has to have some side effects. And this is where it gets really interesting. What are the concerns we're hearing from inside the financial sector?
The criticism really boils down to 2 main points. First, there's what's called the crowding out effect.
Oh, cute. Right.
Yeah. When you flood the market with these policy guarantees, it just artificially pushes down the lending rates for those specific loans. It can distort the whole market.
How much of a distortion are we talking about?
Well, the source notes that at the top 5 banks, these guarantee-backed loans have rates around, say, 3.68% to 3.88%.
Yeah.
But a standard unsecured loan, that's way higher, somewhere between 4.41% and 5.8%.
So you're making government-backed loans artificially cheap, and that probably discourages other kinds of more organic risk-based lending. What's the second point? The more political one.
That would be the big concern over quanchi finance or government-controlled finance.
Oh, like you.
Yeah. Critics are basically saying that, look, the spirit of win-win finance is fine, but the sheer scale of this and the kind of, implicit pressure involved, it's starting to step on the toes of the bank's own management.
It's seen as an overreach.
Exactly. One lawmaker was quoted saying that social contribution is good, but it shouldn't go so far that it infringes on the bank's autonomy. So you have this clear tension. Banks are being pushed to shoulder a massive social cost, and it's affecting their business.
That really paints a picture of banks caught in a bind. Okay, so let's pivot from that pressure to the regulators. How is the Financial Services Commission, the FSC, seeing things? What did Chairman Yi Won have to say?
The chairman laid out a few key positions. First, on household debt. Credit loans went up by about a trillion KRW in October.
Right, that got some headlines.
It did, but he was pretty quick to downplay the risk. He basically said that since mortgage loans are coming down, this small rise in credit loans isn't enough to threaten overall financial stability. So a tone of measured confidence there.
And what about that really thorny accounting issue at Samsung Life? The whole thing with the policyholder stakes, the Yubodang.
Yes, that's been a big headache. And while the FSS, the other regulator, had sort of set a timeline, Chairman Yi-won seemed to be signaling let's call it a speed adjustment.
A slowdown.
Pretty much. He stressed that it needs sufficient opinion gathering and deep discussion. To me, that sounds like a much more cautious approach, and it probably means a delay. It's a classic case of, complex maneuvering around accounting rules.
Did he give any clues about where the government wants to direct its big investment funds?
He did, and it was all about the future economy. He predicted that the National Growth Fund's first big investments will pop up very quickly in the AI and semiconductor sectors.
No surprise there.
Not at all. And on top of that, to boot what he calls productive finance, the FSC is fast-tracking a change to the Financial Holding Company Act. It's a big deal. It would let financial groups own up to 15% of a fintech company, a clear signal they want to ease regulations in the tech space.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about this top-down policy and the pressure on the big banks. But let's look at the flip side. Let's go to the grassroots. I love this next example. The Busan Songnam Credit Union. They have this incredibly unique loan product.
This is a genuine aha moment in the source material, I think. It's such a contrast. Okay. This is a small, community-based institution, and they offer loans secured by frozen seafood.
Frozen mackerel, specifically.
Right, stored in cold storage facilities. And it's not a tiny program. This niche product has grown to 20 billion KRW. That's 13.3% of the credit union's total assets. It's amazing.
Frozen fish is collateral. I mean, the risk management on that seems like a nightmare. Prices fluctuate, supply changes, you have to check the storage. How do they possibly make that work?
It all comes down to one thing: specialized local knowledge. The chairman there, Im Won-soo, he started working in the fisheries industry back in 1972.
Wow, so that's over 50 years of experience.
Exactly. 50 years. For a product where valuing the collateral is everything, his deep understanding of market prices, supply, even just physically inspecting the goods, that is the secret sauce. You can't just create that kind of expertise overnight. It shows how real organic specialization works.
It's the perfect example of a sustainable, community-focused financial model. It's a kind of win-win finance that actually works because it grew from the ground up, not mandated from Seoul.
It is, and they back it up with real community welfare. They recently paid for a 3 million KRW surgery for a student from a single-parent family. The chairman said that when the community prospers, the credit union is more stable. It's a virtuous cycle, totally different from the top-down pressure we were just talking about.
Okay, that brings us to our final piece of the puzzle, this other major conflict for the big banks, the burden from international standards. The banks are actually asking the authorities to delay a new capital rule.
That's right. They want to delay in the phased increase of the minimum capital floor for risk-weighted assets, or RWA.
This comes from the Basel III standards, right? The RWA output floor.
Yes. To put it simply, it's a safety net. Even if a bank's own internal math says its assets have a really low risk weight, the output floor sets a minimum value they have to recognize based on a standardized model.
And that floor, that minimum, is going up. It's at 60% now, but it's scheduled to climb all the way to 72.5% by 2028. Why is just raising a mathematical floor causing such a panic?
Because of the formula. When your RWA number goes up, which this rising floor forces it to do, your bank's key safety metric, the CET1 ratio, it automatically drops.
So your safety cushion gets smaller?
Your safety cushion gets smaller. Think of the CET1 ratio as your budget for taking on risk. A drop in that ratio means you have less capacity to absorb losses. And, crucially, it makes it much harder for banks to do risky things, like corporate lending.
Which is exactly what the government is pressuring them to do more of under the productive finance banner.
Precisely. It's a direct conflict. The government is pushing them to expand high-risk lending, while at the same time, international rules are forcing them to recognize more risk and shrink their capital ratios.
A classic rock and a hard place situation. So what are the financial authorities saying in response?
They're in a tough spot, too. Their official line is that, look, it's really hard to adjust this timeline because it's tied to international standards. It's about global credibility. So while the banks are lobbying hard, the authorities feel like their hands are tied. The banks are stuck trying to please everyone and pleasing no one.
This deep dive really has shown this complex duality in the Korean financial sector. You have this constant push for more social contribution.
And at the same time, you have the constraints being imposed by global capital standards. The authorities are trying to navigate global stability, nurture future industries like AI, all while banks are just struggling to balance their books with these urgent social demands.
Yeah, you 사르동케, 유 언제유 한국유.
아니지.
In Wanyun, European University.
in